almost a psychic, you understand the word psychic? ESP? Yeah. It's almost a psychic attraction. You're not sleepwalking, you're not dreaming, you're really conscious, but something is making you brave. Something's making you get closer and closer to the cornstalk. Although I would use the flashlight as a weapon, meaning if you're afraid, I think rather than holding the flashlight comfortably down here, you'd hold it out like that. It's kind of like a lance, a magic user lance, as you walk through here. And I would come out of the house this way. I'm going to have you walk down the corn sideways, looking in here, and actually you'll be making the beam go across the lens, which looks very pretty. And also it's kind of scary. My appetite has always been to, put a lot of value on the screen, and sometimes the people become somewhat diminished because of the story that surrounds them. But with E.T., I had always really wanted to tell the story of a disenfranchised and lonely boy in a relationship with siblings, a sister, a brother. I had 3 younger sisters. And I also wanted to tell a story about the divorce of my parents.
Dad would believe me.
Maybe you ought to call your father and tell him about it.
I can't. He's in Mexico with Sally.
And for a while I've been thinking about just a movie about a child's reaction to his parents splitting up when he's still only about 10 years old, and how that impacts him for the rest of his life. And E.T. was on my mind maybe for 15, 20 years, perhaps for a number of years somewhat subconsciously, as a fantasy of mine, as a way to make myself feel less lonely in my life. And also, it was a childhood fantasy to tell the story of a best friend and a special friend who rescues a young boy from the sadness of a divorce. So E.T. sort of came about in stages for me. Close Encounters, which I made in the mid-'70s, was a movie, really, it was really the original movie, and E.T. therefore is the sequel.
One of the things that really, really inspired me to want to work with Steven was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The movie had a profound effect on me, and I really feel in looking back that movie, more than anything, was the catalyst that really moved me into saying, this is what I want to do as a career. I want to make movies. And so when I did, in fact, find myself eventually working with Steven, one of the things that we talked a lot about was the research that he had done during the making of Close Encounters with a man named Hynek. And he asked me to go investigate a particular case
having to do with a farm family that was terrorized one evening by gremlin-like extraterrestrials that surrounded the house and kept trying to gain access to the house and rode the cows through the barnyard and made the people crazy.
And I'd seen this movie called Return of the Secaucus 7. Now, why in the world this had anything to do with E.T.? This is the kind of thing I sort of feel I've lost about myself, and I wish I could get back, and I have no idea where it came from. But for some reason, I was intrigued with John Sayles, and no one knew who John Sayles was at the time. And I went running downstairs after the screening to meet him. And I said, I love the writing in your movie, and I think you might be perfect for this project that I'm working on with Steven Spielberg. Could you come meet with us? So he came over to the Egg Company, he sat down and he met with us. We gave him the research on Night Skies, and he wrote the first draft of Night Skies.
But when I read the script, I just didn't feel that was a movie that I wanted to direct. It was too violent. It turned me against myself and against my own beliefs that anything that would take so many light years and so much technology just to get to the planet Earth, would they come with lasers and missiles and bad intentions? Personally, I never thought that would be the case. I thought they would come here to either observe at a distance or to interact in some kind of healthy way. So it really went against my grain as a filmmaker and as a storyteller to tell an aggressive, scary story about aliens attacking a farmhouse. And that's when everything kind of like changed in my mind. it sort of became, I'm not going to make that movie, but I might make this movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark, we were shooting that sometime around 1979 or 80. We were shooting Raiders. And I remember spending not a lot of time between shots, because I shot Raiders so quickly there wasn't a lot of time to think between shots, but there was a particularly long setup, and I walked out into the desert. I was picking up prehistoric seashells out there, because certainly, the desert in Tunisia used to be the ocean a long, long time ago. Maybe that's where Jurassic Park came from, at least my interest in dinosaurs. I don't know, but that all kind of was a cousin to turning over seashells and suddenly trying to figure out, how can I tell the story of this lonely boy? I'm sitting here, I'm a lonely director in the middle of the desert in Tunisia, making a Saturday matinee serial type of a movie. And I won't go into my personal life, but I was feeling a little bit, separate from, from myself, which often happens when you're directing. You kind of go into a kind of fugue state to make a movie. And I was in one of my fugue states, and I suddenly, bang, this concept hit me. I knew exactly how to tell the story of E.T., and the story began to flood into my mind. And for the next couple of days, during the shooting of Raiders, E.T. pretty much had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Cut. Great. Beauty. Okay. Very nice. Good for the stars?
Yes.
Great.
Minor thing.
Beautiful.
You didn't see in the last little.
Yeah. Henry? Great. You okay? Yeah. That was terrific. What? So kind of like the bones of the story began to fall into place in the middle of the Tunisian desert, looking at seashells. And it took me 2 or 3 days to kind of figure out a story. And then when I had it, I remembered loving this movie called The Black Stallion. I loved that picture so much. And I remember loving the way Carol Ballard directed it, and then discovering, or knowing, that Melissa Matheson, who was on the set with Harrison Ford, had co-authored the Black Stallion.
I was in Tunisia with Harrison on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and of course I had been around in London where they had started the picture, and so had become friendly with Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy. So we went off to Tunisia, and I had been trying to write a script based on a book I had optioned, and I was very unhappy with it and feeling pretty miserable about myself. And one day we were out in the Sahara Desert, and Stephen was showing me how to find scorpions, that you just turn over a rock, and there they are. So we were turning over rocks, looking at scorpions, and he asked me if I would consider writing a movie for him. Well, of course. I think I did protest that I was never going to try to do that again.
And I kind of worked on her. I worked on her and kept nagging her about. Went to Harrison. I said, Harrison, talk to your wife. I think she should write this movie. And then I remember Kathleen Kennedy went after Melissa and tried to talk her into it. And between Kathleen Kennedy and Harrison Ford, I think the two of them talked Melissa into at least doing a first draft for me. And so that's how it all got started.